a very special breakfast. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a very special breakfast. I'm delighted that you've all been able to join us. My name is D.Phil, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Western Australia. I begin in the traditional way, acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, the Whadjuk people. We wish to acknowledge their continuing culture and the contribution that they make to the life of this city and region. Safety is one of our core values at CCI. So just a quick message: in the event that we do have an emergency, please head out the doors and make your way down the stairs out the lobby or to Mill Street via the piazza. There will be staff there to direct you. So on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Western Australia and everybody here this morning, I would like to officially welcome you and to welcome our very, very special guest, Telstra's Chief Scientist, Professor Hugh Bradlow. Please join me in thanking Hugh for joining us this morning. In an exciting first, this event is being broadcast live to our regional chamber members, including Albany, Bunbury, Busselton, Dunsborough, Denmark, Geraldton and the Wheatbelt. And I'd like to thank Telstra for helping making this very special broadcast possible and acknowledge all our guests in the regions joining us today. From those of you watching in the regions, welcome, and we really hope that you enjoy the opportunity to be part of this presentation. Please join me in welcoming our guests from around Western Australia. The Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Western Australia has been working with West Australian business for more than 125 years. And today we have 9,000 members who between them employ over 300,000 people who work across every industry and every region of our great state. And our mission at CCI is to help business work. And as the leading voice of business in Western Australia, we're proud to bring you today's event and to provide WA business the opportunity to connect with Australia's business leaders, hear their stories and learn from their experiences. And today we're privileged to be able to hear from Professor Hugh Bradlow, a world-renowned thought leader in telecommunications, who will outline the incredible technological advances set to impact our lives in the coming years and detail how businesses can utilise the opportunities that this presents. I will be introducing Hugh in more detail after we've had a quick bite to eat. But before I do so, I would like to introduce you to Slido. Following Hugh's keynote presentation, we will have a question and answer session coordinated by our Director of Advocacy, Kath Langmead. And if you go to your mobile device, so your telephone, and go to Slido, which is slido.com, that will allow you to put questions electronically to our speaker. You can also look at questions that other people have put in there, and you can like them to elevate them. And so as Kath sits here asking questions, she will be able to see the questions that you are putting in and that you are liking and elevating. So anybody who's part of today's presentation here in the room or in the regions can go now to slido.com, and when you're asked to enter the event code, it is #Bradlow, BRADLOW, followed by your question. So in terms of questions, one thing that perhaps I would like to just share with everybody now is I have spoken to Hugh this morning, and Hugh is not the person who's going to answer all the questions about the NBN, but what he can talk to us about is connectivity and connections, particularly in the regions. And we know that this is a major issue for our members throughout Western Australia. 6 of the slowest 10 regions in Australia in terms of connection are in Western Australia. So we look forward to hearing more about what the future holds for us there. So in the meantime, I would invite you to enjoy breakfast, and we will be back very soon to introduce Hugh. Thank you. I trust you have enjoyed your breakfast, and please keep eating, but I want to be able to maximise the time to hear from Professor Hugh Bradlow, so we're going to move straight into it. Before I do, I'll just draw your attention to our latest WA Super CCI Consumer Confidence Survey. And I think there's some good news in there, and that same good news is coming through in our business confidence surveys. So, so take that away and have a look at the detail of what consumers are telling us about how they're feeling about the future of the economy. It's now my pleasure to introduce our very special guest, Professor Hugh Bradlow, who is the Chief Scientist of Telstra Corporation and President of the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering. Hugh commenced his role as Chief Scientist at Telstra in 2014. He acts as a forward scout for Telstra, looking at the longer-term technology directions and technology disruption that will impact Telstra and its customers. Prior to becoming Chief Scientist, he was Chief Technology Officer and Head of Innovation at Telstra, responsible for the introduction of new technologies into the business. Professor Bradlow holds a degree in electrical engineering and received a Doctor of Philosophy for research in experimental nuclear physics from the University of Oxford. A global thought leader in telecommunications, he was elected as the joint 2009 Australian Telecommunications Ambassador of the Year, named by Global Telecom Business as one of the most 100 influential telecommunications executives in the world, and designated by Smart Company as one of the 12 most influential people in Australian information communications technology. Please join with me in welcoming Professor Hugh Bradlow.
Well, thank you, Deirdre. Hi, Mark. I'm going to whip through a whole lot of stuff very quickly this morning so that you get a snapshot of the sorts of things I've been thinking of. And I want to maximize the time that I have for questions. I'm very excited to try Slido. That's something new for me. I was asking if I could do a thumbs down on some questions, but it doesn't seem to allow me to do that. I do apologise, I've got to rush off to catch the 10:10 to Melbourne, so given the security situation, I'm going to shoot out the door very quickly at the end. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start off by taking you to the middle of the century and trying to imagine what 2050 is going to be like. So the little items that I've ticked there, you can take to the bank. You can be absolutely sure that will have happened. So the first thing is, the most noticeable difference in 2050 will be transport. First of all, internal combustion engines will no longer exist. They'll be gone in transport. No human being will be driving a car on a public road in 2050. Most cars will be shared. Ownership of a car will be as unusual as ownership of an airplane today. And we will have flying cars, also known as human-carrying drones, which are already around. We'll have factories without people, we'll have farms without people, we'll have construction without people. And what's perhaps even a little more surprising, we'll have farms, even those that produce meat and dairy, without animals. They will be produced in factories. And in fact, even some crops will be produced in factories. With cash is gone, that you can take to the bank. Fossil burning fuels, power stations are gone, you can take that to the bank. And most of the professions will have been automated to a larger rather than a lesser degree. That includes law, medicine, accounting, even unfortunately engineering. My favorite story at the moment is they asked a group of artificial intelligence researchers how long will it take for artificial intelligence to get rid of all human jobs? And the answer was 50 years, except for artificial intelligence researchers, that'll take 75 years. What else can we expect? We can expect that we will be able to cure cancer with a pill or an infusion. We'll have virtual humans running our lives for us. So virtual personal assistants, you can take that one to the bank, those are already appearing. Virtual doctors, virtual teachers. A robot soccer team will defeat the human world champions in soccer. Crime will be significantly reduced, and all TV will be delivered by broadband. The notion that you'll have a broadcast system will be gone. So, I want to give you a narrative which says, why do I think that will happen? And then I want to give you some examples of what I will call green shoots, examples where you can start to see the beginning of these things actually happening. So the first thing is, let's talk about digital technology platforms. We have three major ones today. We have the internet, 40 years old. We have fixed broadband, 20 years old. We have mobile broadband, 10 years old. And then we have cloud computing, which is a consequence of broadband plus internet, because you can now start taking your computing power away from your local environment and putting it somewhere in the cloud, and that's unleashed enormous global computing power. And that's already had a significant impact on various industries. Media, cars, taxis, and various other things through crowdsourcing. So we've seen a lot of change, but I keep saying, you know, that Bachman Turner song or whatever it's called, you ain't seen nothing yet. I keep wanting to play that because you literally haven't seen anything yet, because we're about to see new platforms appear, and the most important of which we call in the industry the Internet of Things. And this is triggered by the fact that when you start producing sort of mobile phones in the billions, these devices actually have four very important sensors in them. They have an image sensor called a camera, they have an audio sensor called a microphone, they have a location sensor, and they have a movement sensor, and those sensors are all connected to the internet. And so once you start having communications where you can start measuring things and communicating those into the cloud, it changes the game, and people start to think of other things you can measure, like biomarkers in human beings or animals, chemical markers in the atmosphere, et cetera, and they start then producing those in the millions, hundreds of millions, billions, and they are able to do that with low cost, low power, and small size. So you will embed sensors in just about anything. So that's the trigger. But what's happening now is we're creating a platform, another platform, a fourth digital platform, which we're calling the Internet of Things. And that consists of networks, and those are changing in order to accommodate the variety of this Internet of Things. And they consist of cloud services that are specialized for the Internet of Things, mainly about managing the sensors and managing the data. And I'll come to the data in a moment. And then on either side of that, you have, for individual applications, sensors and applications which build on that platform. Now, I know I've been spending a lot of time in rural Western Australia recently, and I know you're going to say to me, this is all well and good, but if you haven't got the communications, you can't use this stuff. True, happy to deal with that in question time. I don't have time right now to give you the full explanation. The data platform is the new gold rush. So what everyone's trying to do is the technologies in the cloud called big data, which allow you to collect and manipulate the data. But what everyone's trying to do now is assemble data sets. It is the gold rush, because if you have these data sets, you can start doing new forms of analytics, which are loosely called artificial intelligence, more specifically called machine learning, because what you do is you trade algorithms using data to do certain human functions, and I'm very specific about that, is certain human functions, in particular pattern recognition. Now, the most important pattern we recognize in our daily life is speech, and you can see from this curve, if I can use the cursor finger, you can see that speech recognition, which I happened to work on in the 80s and 90s, bumped along at an unusable level of about 50 to 70% until 2010. And in 2010, something remarkable happened, and by 2016, speech recognition was as good as a human being. And the remarkable thing that happened in 2010 was Google threw all their data at a machine learning algorithm called an artificial neural network, and hey presto, the curve shot up. Because it turns out with those algorithms, you can get a machine to recognize speech, and you can do similar things with vision and other patterns that people use. So I literally talk to my house these days. I'm not crazy. I have an Amazon Echo, and I ask it to do things for me, play the Beatles, etc. Shows how old I am. So that was the narrative, right? That's why I think the technology platforms will be in place to achieve this change. What I want to do now is I'm going to whip through segments of the economy and give you the green shoots. And I want to emphasize I could do this for any segment of the economy. I've just picked a few because they're the ones I've spent more time on or I'm more interested in or I'm more affected by. But you can take just about any aspect of human existence and we're going to see these types of changes. And these are some figures, by the way, from Cisco that they put out about 3 years ago. I want you to look at the bottom two. Education for $3 per student per month. Well, my daughter worked for a company that's delivering education in Africa for $6 per student a month already, commercially. That's not subsidized. So we're getting there. $3 per doctor's call. Well, we've got a way to go there. We'll have to get rid of all the doctors first. And that's not a joke. But at some point, they will succumb. It'll just take longer with them. So let me start off with education. So today we have an education system which hasn't changed for 2,000 years. It's a bit like this. You have someone up front talking who's supposed to know everything, and you have a bunch of people sitting in the class who are supposed to be learning. And of course, that doesn't work that well on an individual basis because little Johnny up at the back has got it all in one go, and little Pauline in the front has not got it at all. And so, you have to tailor the system to actually cater for individual needs. And so what people are now making, there's a company called MindDojo already doing this, is they're using online systems to adjust the course needs and the course flow according to an individual's ability to absorb it. And they may change the order of the course, they'll change the timing, but starting to tailor that education to the individual needs. Now they're doing that today on the basis of what I've called their endogenous data, which is the data from within the system, the data that you measure, things like attendance, the time they spent on a module, their results in a quiz, those types of things. However, we have the opportunity to bring in the exogenous data, and that's much more powerful because you can start putting biomarkers on people, biomeasurements, and things like cameras so that you can see that Fred is really bored by this topic and either needs to be sent out to have a cup of coffee or speed it up for him, or you can also see that Fred had a really bad night on the town last night, is hungover, and is not really doing that well, so send him back to do something simpler or back home to sleep it off. But we're going to see that sort of tailoring come in more and more. And by the way, this concept of exogenous data I'll come back to in a moment because that is going to be an extremely important consideration. The other thing that's going to happen in education is virtual reality. These are these headsets like the one I'm wearing over there, which give you a fully immersive experience. Now, those are kind of green shoots at the moment because they've got a long way to go, mainly being used for games. They cause 10% of people to become sick. So there are a whole lot of issues around them. But don't look beyond all that, and you'll start to see potential to do things you've never been able to do before. So 30 years ago, when I was a real professor, lecturing in electrical engineering, I went to head of departments meeting and I said, we can get rid of labs in electrical engineering. Well, that was about as sacrilegious as you could get, and I nearly got lynched. But in fact, virtual reality makes it possible to start getting rid of labs and to simulate the real world and visualize it in front of you. So here's a student learning how to design a diesel engine. Not only are they able to see the airflows that on top of the engine, which are normally not visible in a lab, but they can also see the airflows inside the engine because you can do the measurement, you can do the visualization of that. So virtual reality will change education and how we deliver it as well. Now I want to move on to medicine. So the thing we're seeing at the moment is that the mobile phone turns out to be an extraordinarily good medical platform. This is an otoscope. You use the communications, the image recognition, processing power of a mobile phone, and you attach things to it. So this is an otoscope, which they designed to be used in developing countries where people couldn't afford proper instruments, and you just attach it to a mobile phone. And I've spoken to ENT surgeons to say that's a perfectly good otoscope. They use it here because it's just as good as anything they buy for 10 times the price. But the more important thing is that you've got a communicating platform so you can start sharing information. So this is a company over here called Kinzer Health, who have a thermometer which is attached to your earphone port on your phone, of course, unless you've got an iPhone, in which case you don't have an earphone port, so you'll have to find some other arrangement. But you attach it to the earphone port, you take the temperature, and then you can start sharing that information demographically. So you may have a school where you share the information about the kid's temperature, and the teacher can get up in the morning, look at the portal and see, oh, half my kids have got temperatures. I better tell the other half not to come in because there's something going around the classroom. And I've heard mental health experts say that the most powerful mental health tool today is a mobile phone because it enables people to get connection and treatment, which they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. But we're heading into a completely different realm here. So people are making what are called Band-Aid sensors. This is something that you stick on your chest. It's not a heart rate measurement, it's a single lead ECG. It continuously is transmitting your ECG signal into your phone, which then can relay it through Bluetooth, through the 4G network into the cloud. And in the cloud, you're running a machine learning algorithm that's looking for patterns, and those patterns it's looking for are anomalies. And it will see an anomaly and alert a human being saying, we have an anomaly in this person's pattern. And that human being will decide, yep, that person needs to go into hospital straight away, and you'll be sitting at breakfast one day and someone will come in and cart you off to hospital and you'll be feeling perfectly fine. I normally give this to a much older demographic, so they resonate with that. The point about it, though, is that's like having a 24/7 heart physician with you all the time. So it's a virtual doctor. Now, can we keep people healthy so you don't have to cart them off and their hearts don't pack in? So there's a company called Habit, which Campbell Soup have just bought, who have a system whereby they take DNA and blood, and they can predict what food types are going to best match to your body. And so they will serve up meals on a scientific basis to give you exactly the right nutrition to avoid you getting things like heart problems and obesity and other such issues. The next thing we want to be able to do is grow the food. So I mentioned food will be grown in factories. This is one of the world's first indoor farms. It's the biggest in the world. Those things stacked up there are conveyor belts that are growing green leaf vegetables. It's all done with the Internet of Things. It's all tailored with lights, and they automatically feed in water and nutrients to exactly the right level. And they grow the food, and it comes straight off the production line into a punnet and onto the shelves. So it's incredibly fresh, and so much so that some supermarkets are actually building these factories inside the supermarket, because then they can have literally food that's just been grown within minutes. The reason they can do that is, you'll notice I'm wearing clean room gear, is because they actually run it as a clean room, so there are no pesticides required, no herbicides required. So the thing just grows and goes through straight away. And it's much more productive than you get 160 times more food out per acre than you do in an outdoor farm. Financial services, there's some interesting things going on there. As I mentioned, cash is dead. My colleagues all used to laugh at me because 10 years ago I popped up and I said, we'll be using these things instead of our wallets, and we'll be paying for everything with our phones. And it didn't happen. And then next year I'd pop up again and say, we're going to be using, this year's the year. And it didn't happen, and it went on like this for 10 years. But I knew it had happened last year. I actually was in Perth, and there was a bus going down St. George's Terrace saying, ANZ, pay with your phone. So it finally has happened, and nowadays when I go and pay with my phone, A year ago, people used to say, oh, that's cool. Nowadays, they just go, yeah, whatever. And, so it's become routine, and that will be the way which we pay, and we'll do person-to-person payments as well. So cash is on its way out, and you can see the statistics declining. But the other end of banking, which is the loans and financing aspect, is also in for a shake-up. So this is a company called Square. They make a little dongle that fits in your phone, and you can take payments with it. And what they found was that business model works, but it's not that great. But what they really found is the people who are using it are all small businesses who are struggling to get loans from the big banks, because the big banks have heavy and obtrusive procedures, and I can tell you this because I've just tried to refinance a mortgage, that make life incredibly difficult. So what they did was they set up Square Capital. They collect all the data from the transactions, and they can tell exactly how much finance a business can afford and how long it will take them to pay it off. So a company will go to Square Capital and say, I need a loan for inventory, I need it for 6 months, and they can instantly say, yep, you can afford to do that and pay it back within 6 months. And so they are starting to find Square Capital is more profitable than their original business. Retail. So this is a mock-up, unfortunately, because by looking at me, you can tell I hate clothes shopping, and we did actually try this technology, but it wasn't quite ready for prime time. But you'll notice she is trying on different clothes without actually going into a changing room. She's doing it through an avatar, and she's able to test it for form and fit. So she can see style and fit on her avatar. And she can do that. Obviously, she doesn't have to go in the shop. And believe me, from personal experience, she doesn't want to consult the guy sitting in the chair because he doesn't know enough. She wants to consult her social network, and she's going to be able to do that all from her home. So a lot of the reasons we go into stores today are starting to disappear. And in fact, in the States now, they're talking about zombie malls, because retail is declining so fast in the States that big malls are now half empty. And we can just assume that's a precursor to what's going to follow. By the way, I was astonished to see, is anyone in retail in this audience? That's unfortunate, because I wanted to do a quick straw poll, but I was astonished to see that half of the retailers in Australia don't think Amazon's going to influence their business when it comes. Now, from the castle, tell them they're dreaming. My daughter lives in DC, and she and I share an Amazon Prime account. I get all the media from it, and she gets the instant delivery. She doesn't go into a shop anymore. Everything's delivered through Amazon. So it's a hugely transformational experience when you're getting that sort of service. So another reason why we won't need to go into shops is if it's a Telstra call, answer it. Is because of customer service. So we've talked about virtual reality. Augmented reality is a much less immersive experience because you're using normal glasses. You can see the real world, but what you can do is actually merge the physical world into it. And when I say merge the physical world, I mean the digital world, it's actually a mixed reality. So you have depth sensors and cameras that digitize what's in front of you, and then if you draw on that digitization, it gets merged into what that you're actually looking at physically. So the example on the left, which is from Microsoft, is called a HoloLens. The young woman is doing some plumbing in her flat. Her father is helping her with the plumbing, but you can think of this as a customer service experience. And he's explaining to her how to change the U-bend and actually drawing on the nuts and saying, you loosen this nut and you put this much torque on it, etc. People are already starting to apply that to motor mechanics. So this is something BMW are doing. I saw this at CeBIT in Hanover in April, where they're using these virtual reality lenses to actually train mechanics. And what you can do is you can take a relatively unskilled person and enable them to fix an engine, because you can give all the instructions down to the level of torque that you've got to put on the nut through that experience. And I'm going to end off with two things. This is going to be the most transformative experience. As I said, this is the thing you will notice. This is a world in which no human beings are driving. There are no traffic lights, no one's stopping, including pedestrians and cyclists. Cars are platooning. It's complete flow, no congestion. It does have one problem, is it will require a little bit of user education. Watch the guy at the end. We wouldn't be that keen to do it, but for reasons I can explain, the cars, his phone is actually talking to the cars and trucks that's about to hit him, saying, I'm here, watch out for me, I'm here, watch out for me, etc. So we will have a completely transformed world when we get to that stage. And the last thing is the construction industry. I was interested to see that Australia's growth is largely fueled today by the construction industry since the mining downturn. The construction industry is using, starting to see 3D printing come into it. And this is in fact an Australian company that I captured their website from. But they have a model for doing 3D printing. And so we can actually see that starting to appear. And it's going to be much cheaper. Michael and I were just talking about this beforehand. It's going to be transformative in the building industry. So there are a few caveats. I'm just going to quickly, and I'm going to skip this, but just let me say that one of the caveats is cybersecurity. It's not the end of the world. We can address it, but you have to be constantly vigilant. One of the other caveats are jobs and the future and the shape of our society, and there are a few others as well. But I'll stop there because I see I've hit my time, and I'd rather have questions from the audience. And Cass got Slido for me.
That's right, I do. Thank you very much for that very informative and insightful presentation, Hugh. We're very pleased to be broadcasting this event to the regions as well, and we've got lots and lots of questions to get through using our Slido platform. It's not too late to upvote other questions if you like, and you'll keep me on my toes. But to kick off, I thought we should start by talking about big data and how you think big data will push the technology landscape. Are we headed towards a more regimented framework, or will we see a more postmodern ERP best practices?
We definitely will see the postmodern ERP best practices. So there's a company, for those of you who do things like financial reports monthly, called ThoughtSpot, which you should go and have a look at, because instead of waiting 3 days for finance to do all the end of month reconciliations, you just say to them, what were my sales in Albany this month, and it'll pop it up for you through a search procedure. I didn't talk about search as a technology, but it's going to be a critical factor. But I thought where you were headed with that was on privacy, and that is something we are going to have to worry about. But there's an even bigger concern I have, is we don't understand what a monopoly is in the digital age. And, the European Union has just fined Google 2.7 billion euros for what they say are monopolistic practices, which they weren't, in my view, and it was a rather clumsy attempt to regulate. But the fact is that power is being concentrated through data, and we are going to have to find a way of legislating a much more level playing field. And, I didn't get to the caveats and all the caveats, but one of the things that really worries me is over the last 20 years, capital has grown enormously and wages haven't. So we're seeing the rich get richer and everyone else getting poorer, and we can't allow that as a society.
Well, when we think about the next generation, I think Brian Haggerty's got a question for us, which is very apt. What should we tell our kids to study at university to be adaptable in the rapidly changing world?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I've got a whole paper I wrote on this, which will be published next month. But, and that's probably the most common question I get asked. I always say, don't become a lawyer or a doctor, so 2 of my kids have done law and 1's done medicine. But the fact is that the jobs that will survive are the jobs that involve human beings. And so we have to have jobs, we have to teach our children empathy, and EQ is going to be more important than IQ, and our school system is not geared for that. At the moment, empathy is something you learn at home. And what we're seeing are large slabs of populations, e.g. witness the US, who just have no empathy. And those people are losing in this society and will lose even more. So we've got to do something about that. The second thing is, it's no longer good enough to say, I never could do maths and I got on fine, so little Johnny doesn't have to do maths. Everyone needs to have an understanding of STEM because it's going to be the way in which the world works. And every single thing you do will rely on data and the analysis of that data, and if you have no idea how analysis is done, you are going to be unemployable.
Glenn McTaggart from Landmark, who I believe is joining us from our regional broadcast, asks, what do you see as the main technologies that will impact agriculture in the next 5 years? And I know we had another question specifically about dairy farming as well.
So the big thing that's happening at the moment is the Internet of Things, is being able to measure in much more detail things like crop growth, weed growth, where you put moisture in the soil, doing it on a much more granular level. And there already are companies that are measuring using satellite technology, using hyperspectral measurements that will give you, a farmer, a very detailed analysis of their paddocks and how much moisture they've got and where they need to add moisture and where they need to add herbicide and where they need to add pesticides, all those things. And to be able to compare that on a region-wide basis and say to them, you're at best practice or you're way off best practice and here's what you've got to do to get there. So that's going to be transformational in the short term. The next thing that will come along are robotic planters and things. Those are already halfway there, but getting to, again, much more granular level. The thing I think is the most amazing, but then I know nothing about it, is synthetic biology. But there are companies who are manufacturing milk, leather and meat and chicken in factories. You basically, as I heard Craig Venter, who did the original sequencing of the genome, say, you go from the algae sludge to a beef burger without the intervening cow. And they say, there's a company that says it'll be able to produce chicken, which tastes like chicken, by the early next decade at commercial rates. So if they're right, that's huge.
And very impactful for breakfasts like today. I'm glad that you mentioned the Internet of Things. We have a question from Damien about, will the Internet of Things bring about major network security challenges? And does this increase vulnerability for business?
Yes, and those are the two slides I left off at the end. So the Internet of Things has some very specific challenges. If you've got a device, which is a low-power device, run on a battery, you don't want to be out there changing the battery every week. So the battery drain is absolutely critical. So you have to design networks around that. But also, when you've got a low-power device, you can't afford to put encryption into it. And so a lot of these devices, these battery-driven devices today, are unencrypted. And that's a risk, but people are working on a solution to that. The other thing that happens is a lot of the Internet of Things has been designed with functionality in mind, not thinking about security. So they've been what I call epic hacks. Someone hacked a hospital drug pump. It allowed them, from the internet, to change the dose on the drug pump, but to leave the display the same so that the carers didn't even notice anything had changed. So you could literally commit murder by internet. They had to withdraw 1.1 million of these things from the market. People have hacked cars from the internet where you can actually disable the brakes and manipulate the steering. So again, you could commit murder by internet. But that was simply because the systems were designed with functionality in mind, not with security in mind. We're in a much better place now where everyone is thinking about security and we're starting to design for security, and there are ways of doing that.
Which leads me to my next question from Anonymous, who have put in lots of questions today, in fact. How can we reduce cybercrime with all these technological advances?
So there was another slide I left off. So one of the reasons why we have so many cybercrime problems today is because our generation, mine, not yours necessarily, is pretty inept at using technology. And, you know, I looked at the British Parliament recently got hacked. Wasn't that, I'm sure that the people running IT in the British Parliament are perfectly capable people, but you've got a bunch of old fuddy-duddies sitting there who've got no idea. So you should, there's sort of 4 golden rules. Anyone here using two-factor authentication? About a quarter, okay. If you're not, you should do it on every email account you own, your Facebook account. Everything should be two-factor protected. That's using your phone as a second way of logging in. But that is not enough. You also need to use strong passwords, which means you've got to use a password manager, protected by two-factor, of course. You do have to run a virus manager as well, and you have to keep your software patched. It has to be up to date. So if you follow those, your chances are much less of getting hacked. It doesn't make you invulnerable, and you have to still be vigilant. But that's one of the real problems at the moment, is people are just not thinking enough about security, and that has to change.
On a different note, how will fintech change in the next 10 years, and what insights can you provide into online currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, so let me start off with Bitcoin, because I've never been a fan. I wanted to talk about blockchains, but I just didn't have enough time. But Bitcoin, one of the promises is trans-border transactions without the fees. So if I want to send my daughter in the US $100, I pay my bank $20, they take a 5% spread on the exchange rate, and then her bank charges her $20. So at the end of the day, she gets $50 out of the 100 I've sent her. It's been a nice little earner for the banks for a long time. So it would be nice to think I could use Bitcoin just to bypass my bank, whom I hate with a passion, and get straight to my daughter. Turns out it's unnecessary, because there's a company called TransferWise, and there are a few of them. They're out of Estonia, and they basically have a very simple system. They run a bank account in Australia, and they run a bank account in the US. I transfer them my $100 into their Australian bank account, so there's no international transaction from the point of view of my bank. They charge me $4 transaction fee. They take no spread on the currency conversion, and they pay her out of her out of their US bank account. So instead of her getting $50, she gets $96. So those sorts of things are starting to chip away. They're disaggregating the banks. And I actually have now worked out, other than times of extreme stress when I need my line of credit, I have now found a way of actually depriving my bank of all its income that it got from me over the years. And that is my objective in life, is to keep the line of credit, but to give them no income. And I will achieve that in 3 months' time when I retire. So the banks will get torn apart by that.
What are your thoughts about Facebook having to shut down 2 of its AI robots after they created their own language and started communicating?
Yeah, that's... I don't know that specific incident. Let me deal with a more general question that Elon Musk is beating a drum about, which is that human beings are going to be taken over by machines. I'm not going to worry about that. My kids don't have to worry about that. My grandkids probably don't have to worry about it. It may happen, but we're talking centuries, not decades. So AI today, and that's why I talked about, when I talked about pattern recognition, extremely specific. It can do certain things extremely specifically. Give you a simple example. Human beings can do what we call one-shot learning. So I can take a toddler and show them a cat, and thereafter they'll recognize all felines as cats, including things like lions, which are big cats. So a machine can't do that. You have to show it literally millions of pictures of cats to get it to recognize cat. So that's just a simple example of how far away we are from human-level things. And yeah, people have done these. Google did it with DeepMind, where they trained the thing that did the Go game to 2 machines playing against each other to learn. You can do that thing, but it's really just generating data. It's not magic.
On a personal note, I think we have time for 2 more questions. So, what is the most innovative thing you have seen in your time as president of the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering?
Gosh, this is like asking me which of my children I like most.
We'll get to that.
I've seen so many amazing things, but I think I would say that the mobile internet has been the most transformative thing I've seen in my career. The ability to have everything attached to me in this device in my pocket has changed the world in ways I dreamt about as a student but never thought I'd see. And so I think I will give Steve Jobs credit, even though I don't use Apple. I'll give him credit for inventing the category of the mobile internet, because that has been a huge transformation. But there's so many other things, if I could just bring them to mind.
And you announced, I think, last month that you are retiring later this year. And you've had a long and successful career, I think 22 years with Telstra. What would be the top 3 lessons or takeaways that you could share from that long and illustrious journey?
Yeah. Look, I've always believed, as one of my staff once said to me, Telstra is an intensely political place. And I refused to play politics one day. And one of my staff said to me, you think goodness is its own reward. And I've always believed that. I've believed that if you do the right thing, then the right things happen to you. That's not necessarily true, I have to add. But at the end of the day, I've got to go home and sleep with myself. And so I want to be able to say that I did everything with the best of intents. It doesn't mean that I got them right. And one of the things I've always tried to make sure is that I've never glossed over things. So I've always tried to understand root causes, and maybe that's just the engineer speaking inside me, but I always want to know why. Why is it like that? I've annoyed a hell of a lot of people by doing that. I've annoyed them more by actually telling them why, and they don't want, as that guy said in A Few Good Men, you don't want to hear the truth. But I still believe that from your own intrinsic satisfaction, you've got to do it. The second thing is I've always tried to do the things because I like doing them. I don't think I've ever really done a job that I don't like, but I've done aspects of jobs that I don't. And everything has, as Einstein said, research is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. You've got to do the perspiration. That's just a necessary condition. And I've never had much truck with people who say, I'm too clever and too ethereal to actually do the hard yakka. You've just got to do that. The third thing is you really need to know who you're going to piss off in life, because in Telstra, if you want to survive 22 years, you've got to pick your battles. And I've picked battles and not. So, yeah, not really a good answer, but there you go.
Sage wisdom. And what will you do next? What will goodness in retirement look like for you?
So I have a mission, which is I came to Australia 30 years ago. I think this is the best place in the world to live. I think we have tremendous systems, institutions, infrastructure in place, and that we have tremendous opportunity to be the leading 21st century country. But we won't do that by being backward looking. Everything I've said to you today is about disrupting today and vested interests. And there are too many vested interests in Australia who are swaying the debate with completely stupid things. I have to say this. The debate in immigration is utterly stupid. The debate in same-sex marriage goes to the core of our values in terms of being progressive. It's not some peripheral thing. The debate on power is utterly stupid, coming from all levels of government. And my mission in life is to educate people so that they revolt against stupid politicians.
I expect we'll see lots of letters to the editor from Hugh Bradlow, private citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to put your questions to Professor Bradlow for our event. Please join me in thanking him very, very much. That officially concludes our breakfast this morning. Thank you very much for coming and have a wonderful day.